Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Yes, honestly, go and look at shareholders agreements and the different clauses. It takes you about half a day to understand most of it, and then go ask your lawyer. I think the next person up. Shall we go straight into the next presentation, or shall we have a break first? How does everybody feel? Okay, let's.
I'm fine.
Oh, you're fine. Okay, Eitan, if you're ready, you are welcome to go into your presentation.
Sure. Let me just put my computer on do not disturb so I don't get any unwanted messages during this presentation. Okay, cool. So I was asked to present on, how's that? Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, thank you.
All righty, cool. So I was asked to present on funding readiness, which is, so maybe just a brief intro on me. So my name is Eitan. I'm a commercial lawyer. I run a company called Legalities. We are a team of lawyers across a couple of different sectors. So IP, regulations, labor, commercial lawyers. My background is I do entertainment and commercial work. And yeah, so we kind of offer a whole bunch of services for the tech and creative industry. And what we try to do is try and make legal services a bit more understandable and a bit more affordable. That is basically a brief on us. So what I'm talking about today is funding readiness. And I suppose it's this thing about raising money in general. So like, why would a company need to raise money? I'll chat about a kind of few of the considerations that I think are worth looking at when raising money. And then, you know, like if you are going to raise money, how do we contract around that? And then I'll look at maybe at the end, if there's time, a couple of alternatives about to raising money. You got to just give me, I don't have the timer open. Ah, there we go. Now I do. Okay, cool. So I want to start off with the two brief stories. The first is a company. It's California in the year 2002. There's this guy. His name's Nick. He's just got back from a surf trip to Australia, and he's got terrible photos from his trip. And he figures, wouldn't it be brilliant to have a type of camera that could take photos of his surfing trip? So he literally makes this little makeshift camera in a little plastic case, and he has this idea to start selling these things. The problem is that he's got no money. So he does what any entrepreneur would do. He goes to the market and he starts selling beads and bead necklaces out of his van. And doing this, he raised $10,000 and he started a company called GoPro. And you know, and he did this through bootstrapping it. He did all the emails himself. He did the design himself. He did the driving to supplies himself. And in his first year, in 2004, he launched. He did $150,000 in revenue, 2005, $350,000. And 9 years later, 2014, he went public for over $2 billion. And it kind of took him 10 years to get to this goal and this dream of you know, taking GoPro public. That's the one story. It was a slow, consistent success. The other one is this guy called Travis, also in California. He goes out on a night out and he gets a taxi home at the end of the night. He's in a different city. It costs him $800. And he figures there's probably a better way to do this. He builds this prototype. They call it Uber. And he invents ride hailing. And it spreads really quickly. But the biggest problem with the idea is it's unbelievably successful, and very soon competitors start popping up all over. So in order to go to market, in order to build quickly, he needed to raise a stack of money to build the technology, to market, and to get more cab drivers and customers on board. And so that company was funded in 2012. 7 years later, 2019, it went public. A massive value, but it raised $25 billion in the process. And I guess the point, what I'm trying to highlight in this is that, you know, with these two companies, is that there's many ways to grow and start a business. And there's a current trend that, you know, you need to raise money to be successful, but there's other ways to do it. And that's kind of one of the things that I guess I want to explore. You know, Uber and GoPro, these are both brilliant companies that, you know, but they're very, very different in terms of their ethics, their values, different product, different marketplace. And I guess the point of what I want to discuss is, we need to start having this conversation around raising money, because raising money in and of itself does not mean success. It just means debt. So, well, it often means debt. So you need to decide if raising money is right for your business. All right. So, and why? So why would some companies need to raise money? Well, certainly if you want to scale fast, cash flow issues, if you want to bring partners on board, if there's urgency in getting to market. So the point that I'm trying to hammer home is this thing that, raising money is not enough, wanting money is not enough of a reason to raise money. You need to have some sort of strategic reason of what you're going to do with that money. Because there's, as the old saying goes, certainly one I learned as a kid, there's no such thing as a free lunch. As soon as you raise money, there's consequences. So what I want to look at is just a couple of the general considerations in raising capital. The first thing is certainly like, what are you going to do with this money? So any way that you look at it, if you're asking someone for money, you need to be specific about what you're going to do with it. You need to be able to budget that money. You need reporting mechanisms. You need management procedures. And you need to, that money needs to be managed. So I suppose, this sounds very simple, but this is an issue that a lot of companies get to. You say you're going to raise money, and then suddenly you get the money, but it's like, how do you have the structures in place to manage it? And often not having those structures in place is going to be the exact thing which stops anyone from funding you. So, I think like in the process of deciding to raise money and doing it, being very specific about what you're going to do with that money, how you're going to manage that money, and how you're going to report around it, and how you're going to know if that money is being put to good use, that is crucial to start to work out, in my opinion. The next thing I think you need to look at is, where's this slide? It is gone. Okay, well, the next thing I think you should look at is, we can look at this one, shared values. So, money is never neutral. When someone invests in your company, they want that money returned. And it's really important to ensure that whoever you're taking money with shares the values that you have for the business. So, for example, one investor may want a financial return. Then you have an obligation to create, a financial return, whereas your incentive may be a much more long-term look at the money. Look, we don't want a short-term financial return. We want the long-term gain, but that's like a misalignment in terms of needs and values. You may have a very philanthropic, or you may find a very philanthropic investor, and then you might be constrained in what you do with the money because of that investor. So, I guess this point I'm just trying to hammer home is the values of your values need to meet the values of your investor. Secondly, funding needs management. Not all businesses are the same. Businesses take money. If you're going to raise money, you need the ability to manage that money. And if you can't do this, if you can't properly, if you're like more of the dev side or of the business creative side, then you need to start thinking about what you're going to do to bring in someone who can manage the money. And maybe just one or two more points on this. I don't have slides for them, but I think it's really important to look at who's giving you the money. Whoever is giving you the money is then part of your business network. I read the story recently about Virgin Galactic. They needed capital terribly when they started running out of money after all the missed launches. And they got a multi-billion-dollar offer from the Saudi Arabian Sovereign Wealth Fund. But this was just before the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi. And essentially Virgin had to turn down this money because it raised too many questions of where it was coming from. And I think like that idea of when you're starting to raise, understanding where you are trying to raise from is a really important thing. The last thing to look at here, also no slide, is that as soon as you raise money, you're starting to lose some control. Right. This is a lesson that I certainly learned as a kid. Money equals control. If you want to be in the decision-making seat, don't raise any money. But as soon as you have someone financially invested in your business, they're going to want some input into it. And that could be, creative control over spending, could be control over management, or even control over your employment. So, it's very important to understand raising money means a loss of control, and you need to be, very happy with that. Me, I don't like to lose control. So I don't, we're not a funded business. And, and there's no right or wrong. It's just, you need to decide for you if you want to be growing slowly and with all control, or growing fast and losing control. Then if you are going to raise money, it's definitely worth starting to look at how you contract over this, right? And with every financial transaction, there needs to be a contract in place. And we hear a lot of things. People say like, we don't need a contract because, we needed to move too quickly, or we know this investor was family. And, us at Legalities, we've heard a lot of sob stories of things go wrong when this is kind of the starting point. So, again, it doesn't need to be, I kind of agree with the previous speaker, which is like, you don't need necessarily to have like a lawyer draw it up in every instance, but you do need to have some aspect of understanding what the terms are of this investment, right? And so what do I mean by this? So firstly, you need to understand what your roles and responsibilities are. So like, what are you going to deliver to your investor? You're going to get funded to do something. So it's crucial to understand what they're getting from that. You need to understand your investors' roles and responsibilities. So what do you expect from your funder? Are they giving you money? Are they giving you contacts? Are they giving you assistance and a network? And this needs to be very, very clear. It can't be vague. Like, what are you going to give them and what are they going to give you? The next one would be payment. So how is payment going to happen? Are you going to get it in one tranche, in several tranches? How are you going to receive this money? You'd be amazed by how many times there's a misalignment of this. Intellectual property. So, with every kind of commercial transaction, it is important to understand how IP is owned and how it's structured. Not all companies have a very clear IP management system, in the sense that maybe sometimes they're licensing IP from I guess even sometimes the founder, or sometimes employees might own some of the IP, or sometimes it might be licensed from third parties. It's really important to understand that you need to, as soon as you're looking to scale something, and if you are in any way like a tech related business, you need to really understand how your IP is formulated, and that needs to be tightened and often formalized. So for example, that might be, if you've got a brand, it would need to be trademarked, because suddenly you're trying to scale that brand and you need ownership over it. Kind of very, very briefly, often money is conditional. So you need to understand what these conditions are. And have those written down. So, I mean, if you take funding, are you then prevented from taking funding from others? If you take the funding, do you have to hit certain metrics? Is it something you have to do in return for that funding, such as, marketing or keeping it confidential, marketing, whatever it is, but you need to understand all the conditions. Reporting, I've kind of mentioned it. There's always going to be some aspect of reporting criteria when you raise money. What reporting are you going to need to give to your fundraisers, to your funders, and yeah, I mean, what are they expecting to see from that? It's very seldom going to be that someone just gives you a blank check and says, call us on payday. So you need to really understand how you're going to report. Cancellation and termination, it can often be tough to terminate one of these, a funding agreement once you've been funded. But I suppose even that is important to understand. Like, if it's not working, how do you get out of this thing? Is there a mechanism to cancel, to terminate? What if the funder doesn't live up to their obligations? What if they take the shares and sign the shareholders agreement, but not give the funding over? So it's really important to understand cancellation and termination. Decision-making, which I've spoken about, and then disputes. So what do you do if there is a dispute in this? I've definitely run out of time. I've got maybe one or two more points about alternatives. I don't know if you want me to finish, or I can wrap up there.
Yeah, how long? A minute, 2 minutes?
2 minutes. So maybe just to mention quickly, because there's, obviously there's, we're all very focused on raise money, but I just want to cover that there are some alternatives to doing this. And especially it's important to look into this in South Africa, because the reality is funding is limited, whereas entrepreneurship is not. There are lots, we have a brilliant society and context for entrepreneurship, but funding is limited. So, the first thing is to bootstrap it, like build a company invoice to invoice. And I think that is something which is really understated today about how possible that is. Raising money, as I said earlier, is not the key metric for success. There's some really daft companies out there that have raised lots of money and don't succeed. So bootstrapping it and You know, like also, I mean, just by going through that process and getting invoices and getting some traction, that's going to make you a lot more tractable to funders if you do want to go that route. Crowdfunding and crowdsourcing, Kickstarter, GoFundMe, there's lots of these things to try create an audience and sell to your audience before you've launched. There's some fantastic websites. There's also things like Uprise Africa, which have tried to like figure out this idea about how you equity crowdfund. So how you actually crowdfund but give away equity. Very new industry in South Africa. There are big regulatory hurdles. So I definitely don't recommend doing that without going through a platform which, you know, is reputable. I mean, they're all quite experimental at this point, but it's definitely an interesting space. You know, build your own community. This kind of relates into crowdfunding, but I suppose there's never an excuse. You know, if you're saying, listen, there is a market out there, it's, you know, the idea of instead of going and raising from investors, why don't you start to build your own community and raise from your market? If I had a bit more time, I can explain what I mean in more detail. And then the last thing, which is super interesting, and you know, it might not be relevant for everyone, but it kind of just, you know, it really articulates that this is a world that's opening up. It's this idea of, you know, cryptos, ICOs, tokens, and finding like, you know, new, very interesting ways to access funding that are outside of the traditional methods and traditional means. And I think if you're a tech company, these new ways of raising money through selling tokens or NFTs of some sort is a really interesting thing to explore. And I'm not saying that you know, crypto is the answer for everything. I'm just saying there is a whole world that's opening up outside of the traditional model of, you know, I've got an idea, go to a VC and I raise. Yeah, and that's about it. You know, I think my final point is, you know, going back to that Uber and GoPro example, there's no right and wrong in this. There's only like your company and your specific circumstances. And entrepreneurship is a creative journey, just like creating your product is a creative journey. And part of your vision and your creativity is to figure out your funding process. And that's kind of all I want to share.